Welcome back to Dave's Garage. Today we're going to take a look at chain adjustment, the slack adjustment on a Versus X300. And this is a follow-up to the chain and sprocket cleaning and maintenance video that I posted a couple days ago. In this video, I'm going to try to do a couple additional kind of check and balances, and I'll get to that here in a second. But right now I've got the bike up on the center stand and make sure everything looks good. You know, you want to check for any kind of links that look like they're hanging up or frozen. In this case, I don't see anything. Everything here is ready to go. I've already taken out the little cotter pin that goes here on this axle nut, and you're going to need a 27 millimeter breaker bar, 27 millimeter, socket on a breaker bar. And you're going to need a legit torque wrench. This is a big one because putting this back together, it's at 73, I think, foot-pounds. And you're going to need a real torque wrench to get that right. On this side, you're going to need a 17 millimeter wrench to hold this while you take the 27 off. And I'm going to actually try to come up with a method while the bike's on the center stand to do the plus and minus here, the max and min movement once I get this thing readjusted, and see if there's any kind of a relationship I can use to just, you know, do a quick test to see if the chain, once it's loaded on the side stand, if it's within that inch to inch and a quarter spec, by having a relationship with the bike up on the center stand. And this will be larger than 1 to 1 1/4, but I want to see some kind of relationship if I can use that as a quick visual test without actually having to try to measure it with some weight and some load on the bike on the side stand, and me leaning over the seat, and yeah, I don't know. There's got to be an easier way. So we're gonna check that hypothesis there. The only other thing I'm going to do when I'm all done is I do not trust these little tick marks on the swing arm. I use a real Motion Pro sprocket and chain alignment tool that goes right onto your sprocket, and with that you can kind of tell, you know, by looking down this rod, you know, if everything's lined up. So I do not go here because I've heard plenty of comments where, you know, people will, you know, owners of their bikes will put this the same on both sides, but yet when they look down the sprockets, they can see that it's not in alignment. I think this is important, as important as actually keeping your chain, you know, slack in spec. So we're going to try it out. We're going to get going here. I'm going to get it off the center stand, get it on the side stand, get the axle loosened up, and then start to work with these things to get my inch of slack. I've loosened up the rear axle, and it looks like my chain slack is a little on the loose side. Instead of like 1 to 1 1/4 inch, I'm getting like 1 3/4 inches, so I'm like a ½ inch too sloppy. Again, it's how much weight you put on the bike, how much slack you take out of it by putting, you know, preloading the bike. I do have a few extra pounds on it, and on the side stand, that's about the best I'm going to be able to do. So I'm going to shoot for tightening this up. So to add to your list of tools you need, you're going to need a 12 millimeter and a 14 millimeter to loosen up the chain adjustments screws here, or nuts that are on the adjustment threaded bolt on both sides. So now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to tweak this until I get this thing, because right now I'm like at 8 3/4 till it goes up to like 10. So 10 1/4, 8 3/4 to 10 1/4. So I'm at 1.5 inches. That's too much. I am going to tighten that up a little bit. Too tight, not good. Too loose, not good. And I'd rather leave it on the you know, the loose end of the spec. So it's not going to take much. I might have to just touch this nut on both sides, maybe, I don't know, just a half a turn. It doesn't take much here to make a big difference on the chain, just so you're aware of that. So I'm going to go ahead and make my adjustment, and then make sure both sides are you know, again, as close as I can with the marks that I really don't trust. And then we're going to go ahead and tighten these back up, tighten the axle up. That might take a couple revolutions, because as you tighten the axle up, sometimes that affects the chain again. So we're just going to get through this process of, you know, adjustment, check, tighten the axle, if anything moved, repeat until I get it right. I'll be back with you when that's done. I've made my adjustments to my chain adjuster bolts and the nut and the jam nut here on both sides. And as I mentioned, it didn't take very much rotation of that nut, you know, on the adjustment bolt to bring this axle back just a tiny bit. And now I believe that it's my chain slack. You know, the center stand's kind of right in the way, but it's sitting right at 9 inches on the bottom end. I'm going to about 10 and a quarter. I mean, I'm right at the upper, I guess the loose limit of 1.25 inch, give or take a little bit. I'm not going to go any tighter than that, so that's good. I've got my I now have my 27 millimeter breaker bar on here. When I loosened up the axle nut, I didn't really, you know, take it all the way off or, you know, make it real loose. There's enough friction in the whole system here that, you know, you don't need to do that. So I'm now just tightening it back up again. And sometimes this can affect things. So I just want to make sure it's just now starting to get more friction, which means, you know, it's probably not going to move around. I have my chain adjustment tool, and you just line yourself up and look right down that rod between this rear sprocket and the front sprocket. You want that rod to look, you know, to point right up through the center of that front sprocket. It's very dark in there, so you're not going to be able to see this very well, but the rod is pointing right up the middle of the chain towards the front sprocket. So I think I got kind of lucky, because sometimes you do this and you look at that adjustment or that center line rod, and it can be off. It depends on if you match what you've done here to the other side. And in the process of tightening things, I've already, you know, tightened up these jam nuts. In the process of tightening things up, this thing here can wiggle a bit. But I'm ready to go ahead and get that large axle nut now adjusted with my torque wrench to 73 foot-pounds. And I'll do that next. I've now used my torque wrench to get this castle nut here at 73. And one of the things you can run into is the hole that is provided to put your cotter pin through will not line up in between the castle nut openings. So I had to go past 73, but how much I don't really know, until I could get that hole in the castle nut to line up. I'm going to recheck my chain alignment tool. I'm going to make sure all my jam nuts here are tight, and just kind of finish it up, and then we'll go back and we'll look to see if anything's moved on that chain. So my castle nut on the far side of the bike is now at a little above 73 foot-pounds. I had to go a little further just to make sure that hole in the cotter pin was all going to work. I've made sure that my jam nuts and my adjustment nuts here on the adjustment bolt are good, both sides. I went and looked down my chain guide again to make sure nothing there has moved. It has not. I'm going to come back down here again, and we're going to look at the wish this wasn't in the way, but we can see that it's right sitting at a little higher than 9, and I can bring it up to about 10 and a quarter. So I'm at 1 1/4 inches here, and that's not with me sitting on the bike. So we're gonna try that. If I hear any kind of front sprocket noise, then we get to do this. Well, not we, but I get to do this all over again, and I get to loosen that chain slack up a little bit, because I do not want to have it be too tight. One of the dangers, let's say that remains too tight, that's putting a lot of stress on the counter shaft coming out of the crankcase of your engine, and that can damage some really expensive parts. So that's one thing you don't want to do. So this is kind of a quick note on what to do to get your chain adjust. As an addendum, I went ahead and checked my chain with all the adjustments I walked through here, and I just kind of laid over the seat and then to try the chain slack, and it appeared to be too tight, so I went a little too far. So when I mentioned that, back here not much is needed in the way of rotations of that nut, in fact not even one rotation, I probably went, I don't know, maybe 2/3 or or maybe half of this 14 millimeter nut, and I actually had to back it back off a little bit and then get my chain slack back in order. So now when I lay over the bike, it's where it needs to be, about 1 inch, not even 1 1/4 still of it. So it's right now it's sitting at 9 1/4 inches. I can pull it down to about 9, and then when I go all the way up, I'm at 11. So my relationship here is, once I'm done with all the preload and sitting on the bike and the chain's getting within spec of 1 to 1 1/4 inch, when I'm on the actually I'm not on the center stand. Let me put it on the center stand, because I want to see what the relationship is there. But when there's just on the side stand here with me not sitting on it, I mean, it looks like I've got almost 2 inches of slack doing it, with no weight. When I lay over the bike before, that chain was real tight. I mean, I couldn't even move it, probably not even a 1/2 inch. I mean, I thought, no, that's too tight. That's when you run into the front sprocket making all the noise, all the whining. So this here on the side stand, I'm at about 2 inches. Let me put it on the center stand. I'll be right back with you. So now I have the X300 on the center stand, and when I'm looking at my measurement here, looks like I'm right at about 11. If I pull it down, it's like right at 11, and then when I pull it all the way up, a little over 13. So like a little over 2 inches, 2 1/4 inches, with the swing arm all the way down on the hanging by the length of the shock. And then when I'm off the center stand, off the side stand, with me draped over the seat, and then hanging my arm down here, it's right about 1 inch, and I think that's good. That's good. You do not want this chain to be tight. You will make an absolute mess of your crankcase and your counter shaft and bearings and everything up here. I have heard, I think, of at least one Versus X300 owner that ended up doing exactly that. It ended up making a real mess. So anyways, just like an addendum, but I finally tweaked it. I used my chain alignment tool, my Motion Pro, and this thing here is wonderful. I mean, you just look right down the chain line, because this thing clamps on, and it just clamps on, and it clamps right on your sprocket. So you want one sprocket totally in line with the other sprocket as best as possible. Again, just for longevity of the chain and the sprockets. These two, my previous video and then this video, goes kind of hand in hand. So anyways, enjoy, and thanks for stopping by. See you on the next one.